Let's see what the stew has for us today.
Welcome to the Gnomecast, a Gnome Stew's tabletop gaming advice podcast. Here we talk with the other gnomes about gaming things to avoid becoming part of the stew, so I guess we'd better be good. This episode is brought to you by awesome Patreon backers like the stupendous Stu Skeel, the judicious John Custers, and the captivating Craig Dedrick. Today we have myself, Ange, along with Jared and Senda, and today we're going to talk about journaling and gaming. Before we dive into that main topic, though, let's ask our Get to Know a Gnome question. Today that question is, what is the oldest physical character sheet or character artifact that you have, and how much do you remember about that character? Senda, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I don't know if that's a good idea, because I remember a lot about my character. It's my first character ever, and her name is Shelzy Oakjumper, and I have all of her character sheets because I filled out a new one every time I leveled up.
Was
So
she
I
a
have,
Kender?
maybe not every time, but like there's a variety of them because we played this campaign for like 2 years, and so they got worn out, and so I would switch to a new character sheet sometimes when I leveled up. But yes, she was a Kender. Why do you ask? Was it the name that was a giveaway?
It was the name and your enthusiasm.
Yes. Well, Shelzy Oakjumper is the reason that I know a lot of things about playing a Kender at a table without being the obnoxious person that people don't want to play with. Because I didn't know that at first, and I learned it by doing it, and my group survived it, mostly. There was a couple people that we had some moments, right? But you communicate at the table, and then you fix things. Yeah.
You know, that could actually be another topic for a future Gnomecast, is like
Playing
how to
Kender
play the
or-
obnoxious character and not make everyone hate you.
Yeah, it's actually something that we talked about on Pandas Talking Games for a whole episode because somebody specifically asked, how do you play a Kender without, like, making everyone hate you? And I do have some opinions about, because it's not just Kender, right? Like, there's a whole series of stereotypes of characters that people are like, oh, you're going to play one of those. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And so, like, there is a thing about, like, not using the type of character that you're playing as an excuse to be an asshole. That's just in summary, but we could absolutely, like talk about that sometime. It'd be great.
Yeah. We'll put that on the list for the future.
Yeah. Short version. Don't use your character sheet as an excuse to be an asshole. Good. Yeah, that's what I got. She was great. I still love her.
How about you, Jared?
So I have kind of a cheat. One, I don't have a character sheet, so artifact I used to say when was the first time I mentioned them on my blog, since I've been blogging for a while. So I have two runners up. One is when I was playing Beast in a Marvel Heroic game, and I bring that up because I played him multiple times. It wasn't just one time, and I dearly, dearly love Beast. And I literally looked up as many, like, quotes from, like poetry and literature and stuff, so that I could just throw out stuff the same way that Beast would do that, like in the X-Men animated series. And, it's kind of a cop-out, but I just love Beast so much that I wanted to do him justice when I was playing the character at that point in time, so...
Sorry, I have a question. So do you actually have an artifact of the list of all the quotes that you looked up? Because that would be amazing.
I need to see if I still have that, because I still have the pre-gen Beast that I use, but I need to look and see if I still have that list, because
cool.
that was fun. It was a lot of fun looking that up.
Yeah, that's fun stuff.
I'm so sorry. Please carry on.
Oh no, that's good. The other one, which is funny, because when you're talking about playing characters that are potentially annoying, the other long-running one that I talked about on my blog way back in 2012 was for the playtest of Edge of the Empire. I made a Gand. And for anyone that doesn't know what a Gand is, if you ever saw the bounty hunter Zuckuss, who had the bug head with the really big eyes,
Yeah.
he was a Gand. But in Star Wars, unless a Gand has done something that is noteworthy, they don't have their own name. So, my Gand was Gand. Gand was an accountant that was trying to make enough money for his family to move up in class. So until he made enough money to help out his family, he was named Gand.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
I had a lot of fun with Gand, but yes, I was also reading the table a lot for, like, when I would really get into, because when a Gand doesn't have their own name, they refer to themselves in the third person, and I was, really playing into all of that stuff, and it was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of reading the table to make sure I'm not pushing this too far because Gan being Gan. It's the Warlock problem from New Mutants sometimes.
Yeah.
Self says self, friend.
Yeah, the shtick can be cute for a little while, but if it becomes the only facet of the character, it gets exhausting.
So what about you, Ange?
So actual physical paper copies, I'm not sure if it's Kiana or Jenshana. Kiana is actually the very first character I ever made in 3.0. She was a ranger. I may have a copy of her somewhere, but I think physical oldest copy is probably Jenshana, who originally was Eberron, Kalashtar. We had a mishmash of the psionic classes on her. We actually have recently revived that campaign, and I remade her as a sword dancer wizard, which is working out to be a lot of fun. But it was like, that's the physical oldest piece of paper I can find. But a couple of years ago, my GM from the 1980s basically sent me a scan of a character sheet he found of mine. I don't know when this was. I know her name was Aoife, although I guarantee you as a teenager in the 80s, I didn't pronounce it that way.
But who knows how you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was apparently a half-elf acrobat.
Wow.
Yeah, and this character sheet is something else. It's the Armory character sheet by D.F. Cole.
Wow.
Like in typewriter font at the top of the page is what that says. And I don't understand anything on this sheet at all. I don't remember this character at all, but I recognize this handwriting as mine.
It's yours. I mean, it's funny because you talk about physical stuff, and I know that I actually have all of Shelzy's character sheets, but I also have an entire collection of art that I did at the time that was both Shelzy and the crew that I ran with, which I don't remember all of the other characters' names, but I do remember the wizard was Gowan, because there was this instance where he was he showed it to someone and they were like, oh yeah, Gowan, and he was like, it's actually pronounced Gowd, and because he had a power trip thing happening because it was all of our first game. Once you have Fireball, I figure you can just call yourself God. It's pretty much,
And I don't know that you can associate with that feeling. Is that something that you understand? This is a
now problem.
This is going to be a now problem.
This is a now problem.
Yeah, we were in John's campaign. We were at a scene where we were kind of hidden and witnessing some bugbears and some ogres and a giant doing a thing. And Jared, our barbarian, and John Carney, our paladin, are debating whether or not we need to get involved in this. And from behind them, my Tabaxi wizard cast a fireball on the whole thing.
Like you do. I mean,
this is a now problem.
I mean, it's sort of, a wizard D&D thing.
Anyway, let's get into the main topic of the discussion. So a while back, we did an episode talking about doing stuff related to gaming outside of actual gaming at the table. And in that episode, we mentioned journaling. And since Senda and Jared have both been doing a fair amount of journaling related to gaming, I thought we'd get together and talk about that whole concept. Both of you are doing it in different ways, because Senda, you're actually playing a solo journaling RPG, whereas Jared, you're journaling from the perspective of your character for our campaign. And those are both awesome things, but also very different.
Yes.
So Senda, tell us about your game.
Well, so the game that I've been playing recently, and it actually, as of the date of this recording, the last day was actually yesterday. So we just finished, and I kind of am now chomping at the bit for a bunch of Kickstarters that I backed that are also journaling solo play games. But we'll get there. I'm sure that I can fill in the gaps in the meantime. So the game that I've been playing is a game by Jeeyon Shim and Shing Yin Khor called Field Guide to Memory, which, if you're on Twitter, you may have like noticed because a lot of us were playing it and we were playing it all at the same time, which was like a key function of this particular game. Although of course you can go back and play it, once they release just the PDF version. But so this game in particular, like journaling games have certainly existed for a while, and actually games like this have existed for a while, but these two very smartly came up with some really good words to describe the specific type of play experience that they were creating, which I think are very cool and very useful. So this particular game is then, I would call, in their terms, which like I said, I think are good, is a keepsake game and a connected path game. And those are two different but related words. And the first one, I think, is the really key part, because that's the part that will continue after this first initial experience. So keepsake, in that it's a journaling game that encourages you to journal not just for the sake of journaling, but for the sake of creating an artifact that you like, that is the journal of the experience, but that is also like something you could hand to someone else and they could flip through, right? And it's really cool from the perspective that it engaged me from the gaming perspective of journaling, which I really enjoy, because solo journaling games with prompts and stuff are a really cool way, in my opinion, to be introspective while being escapist at the same time, right? Because sometimes it's easier to approach your own feelings through the lens of someone else, because then you don't have to come on them directly. You can sneak up on them from the side, like creeping around through the underbrush and then like pounce on them.
Stealth introspection.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, right?
And sneak attack your psyche.
Exactly. It's a really interesting thing, right? Because it allows you to kind of dip into as much or as little introspection as you want, while still engaging it as an escapist gaming experience, which is just a thing that I really enjoy doing it, right? Because I like giving myself the feels, and I like having the feels at a table full of people. Well, you know what? I am pretty effective at giving myself feels too. Like, I just am, and
I'm
that's
sorry.
It's great. So, but the other two pieces of that for this particular game, which has just been an absolute joy, is that so this is a keepsake game, which means that it's engaging my creativity on a physical level, and that like I have this journal now, and when I say I have this journal, I mean it is full of not just the ephemera that they sent out with the game, which it definitely has all of that in it, but also like photos that I have previously taken of similar locales, so that I can be like, yes, and this was a picture of when we were in this place from my particular character's perspective. I made stationery for the museum that she worked for, so that when I was writing letters, I could type it up on that stationery and then print it out, and it would look like a letter that was written that way. And that's how I was keeping my letter writing stuff separate from like the diary parts of the journaling. It was really delightful, and I have acquired so much more stationery stuff because it's been not just a character building and storytelling experience, but then also an artistic and creative experience. And then the third part is that I am left with this really fantastic physical artifact that, because, and I wrote an article about this, right, about like your tools that you use to engage with the game when you play it, and how they can really affect how much devotion you give to it. So I spent like way too long picking out my supplies for this game, right?
I believe when we recorded the episode where we mentioned journaling,
Yes.
you were in the process of choosing your journal that you were going to use for this game.
Yes. So, and it's great. And it's very full. Like, it is not flat, right? And what that did is the third dimension for me of this particular game in the artifact part is that I've come away with something that I like, that I made, that was all of this creativity, that's all the storytelling stuff, and it's also a physical object that I can touch and interact with and look at, and I like the way the cover feels, and the pages are soft, and it's been delightful to write on, and like all of this stuff, right? So it was very easy for me to fall all the way in on this game because it was scratching all of the itches all at the same time, which was delightful. And yeah, it was really cool. And the thing that was super cool about this particular experience and doing it as part of their Kickstarter is that they didn't just release the game and then everybody like picked it up and played through it or whatever at their own pace. I mean, everybody played at their own pace, but what they did is they actually set up an email program so that they sent out one journaling prompt a day, right? So what that meant was everybody who was in on the Kickstarter, we were all getting the prompts and the information to do them at the same time over the course of a month, right?
That's a really interesting way to like take a very solo personal experience and make it communal.
It was really amazing. So this is the other terminology that they came up with, which I think is really beautiful, and it's connected path games.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're doing is we're playing alone as a community, right? And it, which is like journaling as escapist introspection. Like it's a whole bundle of things that sound as if they are opposites from each other, but in fact work really beautifully together. It was really amazing. Basically, every day on Twitter, I was checking the field guide to memory tag. I was posting my pages. And then I was like scrolling through the tag and like reading what everybody else's characters' reactions and stuff were, because we're all living the same story as the main character of the story. But with very different characters, everybody's having a very different experience. It was really beautiful. It was really amazing because it was both alone and not alone. And it was both out of character and in character, right? Like it had a lot of beautiful pieces to it. And I think with journaling in particular, I think those are a lot of its strengths because it's such a personal activity that it can be, I don't know, it can be so much of whatever you want it to be. Anyway, I enjoyed the experience so much that basically what I'm doing is I'm like, I'm hunting through, there's a whole bundle of games on itch right now called Solo But Not Alone, and I'm like digging through it for more journaling games because I want to set up a similar experience just with like people that I know and be like, look, we're going to play this game and we're going to start on this date. Everybody buy a journal. Let's go. Because I think that we can recreate at least some of the like connected path part, which was that part was a truly different experience from other journaling games that I've done solo, because I have done, other games before solo, really enjoyed them, had the escapist introspection part, hadn't had a connected path feeling like this before, and hadn't ended up with a game that had intentionally created keepsakes like this. I actually have, I've taken solo games that I have played and the result of that game and then taken that and turned it into a keepsake very intentionally, but the intention of the game wasn't to necessarily create a keepsake in that way, if that makes sense. So for me, this was like written to do all of the stuff I just wanted it to do. I don't know. I could just keep singing its praises for a long time, and I will say, I don't know exactly when this show will drop, but there are 2 more games that if all of the words coming out of my mouth sounded great, if they're still on Kickstarter, you need to look them up in a now kind of way, and it's Jeeyon Shim has The Last Will and Testament of Gideon Blythe, which is going to be another journaling keepsake game, which looks super cool, and Shing Yin Khor has a Mending, which is a keepsake game in which you are traveling to visit a friend, but you're stitching your path. You're actually sewing your path into like a kerchief. So when you're done, you actually have like a wearable kerchief piece that you can use however you would use a kerchief, which is just like, oh man.
So this episode is supposed to drop on March 18th.
I don't know if they'll still be up or not, but boy, if they are, I think a Mending might still be up. You might have missed The Last Will and Testament of Gideon Blythe. I'm not sure, but you should check.
So, taking a look at it from the other perspective of basically you're playing a normal, RPG, where you got a bunch of people at the table. We're all through Zoom right now, but a bunch of people at the table, and then you have one player who is journaling from their character's perspective. Jared, can you tell us about Nogrot's journal? Because I love it so much.
I was for a second I thought you were going to say you're playing a normal character, and I was going to say you're not talking about Nogrot. That's
No. I don't think any of the characters in our game are normal
we are
characters.
Very unique. So part of my thought process on what I'm doing, and just to so everybody knows, I am keeping a journal. We John Arcadian, one of our head gnomes, is running a game of Storm King's Thunder in 5th edition D&D. Ange and I are both in that game, and I am keeping a journal of that game from the perspective of my character Nagrat. And I have entitled this journal Nagrat's Guide to Storm King's Thunder, in part because I want this to kind of feel like, you know, all of the 5th edition things so far have been like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, or, you know, Volo's Guide to Monsters, or whatever. So I was kind of playing with that same naming convention. But what inspired me to do this is the reason I love the Forgotten Realms. And don't worry, don't turn off the podcast. This what initially caught me though in the oldest products is they are not written as a setting that is just, this is the setting, here are the stats, these are the things going on. If you read the oldest products, they're actually written as, here's what you might see if you go to this place, and then there's Elminster's entry, which is not actually meant to be accurate. It's just from his perspective, where he's saying, you know what, this part isn't true, this part may be true, who knows about this? And it's all his perspective on a location, and then there might be game rules as a third part of that entry. So there's actually a lot of in-character perception of things. It's not just, oh, this is a great country. It's more like, you know, you get some of his snide asides where it's like, yeah, they have lots of law and order, and also these people don't have their voices being heard. You know, you get a lot of that kind of aspect to the commentary for the individual entries. And where we're playing in Storm King's Thunder is an area that was originally called the Savage Frontier. Janelle Jaquays, who is a long-standing figure in D&D, wrote a Forgotten Realms supplement called Savage Frontier. And Janelle did something that nobody else in the realms really ever picked up on, which is her perspective character wasn't Elminster. She had a different sage from that area that was commenting. And that sage had their friend who was like a very, the sage was kind of very much their head in the clouds. Their friend was kind of this like grounded, mercenary type. And that gave you a much different perspective than when you read Elminster's entries. And I really wish more people would have done that. So that's what I wanted to do with Nagrat. I wanted to give the perspective of my character on this adventure, add some detail to things without necessarily those things being true, but they are true from Nagrat's point of view. Nagrat is an Uthgard barbarian.
I love him so much.
He is an Uthgard barbarian who was actually a Furbolg, which is related to giants and also kind of a Fey, sort of ancestry. But he was raised by Uthgard barbarians. So he's kind of between different worlds, trying to find his place in everything. And so he's very fascinated with giant history. And one of the other things that I wanted to get across here is Nagrat has an intelligence of 10. He's not stupid, and he is a barbarian. So I wanted to show that someone with an intelligence of 10 isn't dumb. Like, you can be knowledgeable about certain things. You're not knowledgeable about everything, but you can be very focused on certain things. And one of the things that I like doing is, every so often in that book, is I'm trying to rope in the perspectives of the other characters. So even if I get a chance in game, I will try and ask some of the other players their thoughts on things, so that then I can put those things through what Nagrat heard back into the journal. And anytime Nagrat sounds too smart, I will throw it off and say that Anja's character Sapphire helped me write that part. Because she is a librarian tabaxi wizard. And
I'm a librarian cat.
Yes.
That's awesome. The best. Anyway,
yeah.
Carrying on.
Oh yeah, but we have all of these, all these sidebars will be what I've been putting in, just like the actual journal of what we do. Like, this is what we did on the adventure, but I don't play up the fighting parts or the action parts, because that's the part that's exciting at the table. What I'm putting in there is, what was Nagrat thinking before this thing happened? What was Nagrat thinking after this thing happened? Because I noticed in a lot of games, other players will assume what somebody's character was thinking or feeling, but they're often thinking about that based on stereotypes or archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, surely they just wanted to get in there and murder this person because they were a barbarian. It's like, no, that's not really what was on my mind at that point in time. And so I wanted to capture that perspective, but I also I've put in sidebars that look really important, but they're just Nogrot going off on completely bizarre tangents of things that happen to annoy him at one point or another.
It's actually been absolutely, like, it's been wonderful having those come out for the game, and I think it's actually helped all of the play, because, like, Jared has been sharing it with the group, and so we get the update to Nogrot's journal. It gives us, one, a recap of what happened, so we come back into the game, not going, where did we park? Where we actually, we actually have an understanding of where we were and what we did. But I think it's also helped kind of forge bonds between the characters, because everyone's like, oh, this is a thing, and it helps kind of foster that sense. In an odd way, it helps foster that sense of camaraderie between the characters in the game that would probably be a little stiffer and not quite fully there yet for everyone, because we've got a mix of experienced players and newer players, and like half of us know each other. Like, the two halves of the group, I think, like half of us know each other and the other half knows themselves, and like this is the first time that this particular group of 6 is getting together to play together. So
yeah, a lot of what I've been trying to do is, when you're playing, there are those times when you make those one-off comments that are like, somebody said this and you make this reply, and it could just be like banter in game between two players. But I've been trying to take notes of that and make sure to play that up in the journal as that's those two characters sharing this thing. And instead of just forgetting that banter happened, that's now, like we've been talking about, that's now an artifact. That is something that those two characters shared. And I agree, and I think a lot of that has kind of created this, like, once that's in the journal and those two made this joke with each other, that's a joke those two share, and it becomes like this thing that they refer back to, and Zudrolkin Mountains.
So, I mean, it sounds like to me that, like, you're translating having the job of the person who takes the notes into a really cool out-of-game experience that you get to keep doing in character that actually creates the opportunity for other people in the game to continue to build relationships, because you're doing the relationship thinking and journaling and in-character stuff outside the game.
Mm-hmm. And it's not trying to manufacture relationships, but it's trying to, those things that sometimes fade, especially in a more traditional game where sometimes, once you get into a fight, it's easy to forget that bonding moment that you had. I'm trying to cement those bonding moments between the fights.
Well, and just the fact that you're doing it and then everybody's experiencing it on the read back gives everybody the opportunity to engage in those relationships again, because they're like, oh yeah, we did that thing. Or to engage, or for you to engage with other characters from your relationship, because your character, you're like, okay, well, I need to make sure that I figure out this thing, so I'm going to ask somebody about it so I can write it down later. Like,
yeah, and another thing that strikes me, this has happened in a lot of, especially like in D&D games, where when two people are friends and they kind of joke around because one of them screwed up, that's a thing that happens between two friends. But sometimes in a D&D game, it starts making it sound like, oh, haha, I'm making fun of you because you failed. And I also kind of want that reinforced, like, no, we're all friends. We're not doing this to put one another down. This is that kind of shared camaraderie where we're kind of making these comments about, this is the kind of thing that you always do in these situations, and I should have expected this, and so that it feels more like friendship than it does just one-upmanship.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's really helped with, this mixed group of players we've got, where, like, I had never met the other 3 players we've got in the game, but I feel like I know their characters at this point.
Every time we talk about any kind of intoxicant, and all of a sudden everyone looks at Amira.
Yeah, everyone looks at Amira. And this is actually not the first time I've known somebody who's done this kind of journaling with games. I have a friend who is in a long-running ETU game that just wrapped up, and he had been journaling from his character's perspective from the beginning. And I want to say that his Google Doc is like close to 100 pages long at this point. And one of the folks in my my personal group, he hasn't really shared his journal with the rest of the group, but I know that he's been journaling from his character's perspective since the start of the campaign. And this is a campaign we've been playing on and off since 2015. So he's got this long record of his character's perspective on the stuff that's been happening in the game. Admittedly, his perspective is a little wrong because he's essentially playing an angel on walkabout among the mortals. So it's a very different perspective, but still, it's an interesting aspect to gaming.
I think one of the most interesting things about journaling, kind of no matter how you engage it from a gaming perspective, is that even if it's not something like Field Guide to Memory, which is, this was specifically built to create this really fantastic keepsake situation, no matter how you do it, you end up with that game artifact that is all of that story and memory, which is just cool. It's just not, I'm trying to think of a better way to say that than like, it's really nice to have, but like it gives you that touch point of all of the emotional experiences that you had playing through whatever that was. And the longer the game goes, the like more investment you have in those experiences and that character, and the cooler it is to be able to like go back and have all that information.
I think we as humans, we sometimes need those touchstones for memory.
Yeah.
We need that thing, like I'll fully admit my artifacts from games are not pretty, but they're precious to me. Like I joke that in most of my D&D games, I end up becoming the accountant because I keep track of, like what magic items did we get, who has them, what's the gold, and like all this. And it's very mundane. It's not shiny or interesting to anyone else, but those notes that I keep for that are precious to me because I'd be like, oh yeah, that's what happened in that time we played, and this is when we got this item, and it's like those memories, they help me, keep that game kind of, in my head.
Yeah.
Or to tap into the zeitgeist right now, what is a journal but a game persevering?
Oh God, my heart, Jared.
Okay, we need to move on. I think that's the point where we move on. This show is funded by the Gnome Stew Patreon. You too can become a Patreon backer by following the Patreon link on the Gnome Stew website to the Gnome Stew Patreon. This ad is brought to you by the most perfect, beautiful journal you will ever find. The cover fits your soul, and the paper feels like magic. You know that this book could be gorgeous and hold all of your creativity, but will you ever actually take a pen to the paper? If you're enjoying the Gnomecast, you'll enjoy many of the other Misdirected Mark shows. Here's another one to check out.
Mastering Dungeons, RPG veterans and game designers Teas Abadia and Sean Merwin look at the game and hobby of D&D from a variety of viewpoints, reporting the news, understanding the business, reviewing the products, and illuminating the design. Whether you're a fan, a player, a DM, or a designer, Sean and Teos cover the topics of interest for you.
You can find all of us at gnomestew.com, at gnomestew on Twitter, and gnomestew on Facebook. Where else can we find you folks on the internet? Jared, go.
All right, well, you can find my personal blog at whatdoiknowjr.com. You can find my Twitter at whatdoiknowjr. And if you'd like to hear my actual play podcast, you can find that on anchor.fm/whatdoiknowjr.
Senda, go.
You're better at branding than I am. So you can find me on Twitter, named after one of my other old characters, at Idella Mifflin, which is IDELLAMITHLYNND. You can also find me on my current podcast, Pandas Talking Games, which is Pandas Talk Games on Twitter, or my old podcast, which is no longer producing new episodes, but all of our backlog is still there, and it's still really good, which is She's a Super Geek. Yep. Nope, that was it. I think that was all the things. I felt like there should be more.
No, that's...
Following Jared, I was like, wait, is there something? Am I missing? Usually at this point I say, and I write articles for Gnome Stew, but like that's sort of right here, right now.
Yeah, we're already here. Yeah. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as Orikes13, ORIKES13, though, as always, I'm kind of silent on Twitter right now, and Instagram is mostly cats.
Oh my gosh, you know what's new though? TikTok. I have a TikTok now.
What's your TikTok?
Idella Mifflin. Because once you've committed, you just stick with
Stick
it.
You've
with the
already
bit.
committed.
You just gotta go with it. If I changed it up, it would be terrible. No one would ever find me.
So, do you think we avoided the stew this week? Or...
Well, I've been jotting down this map in my journal that's supposed to be the way out of the bottom of the stew pot. So I guess we can see if it works.
Let's try it.
And if we didn't, I just need enough time to record my thoughts on impending doom.
Cool.
Gnomecast is hosted by Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Okay.
Welcome to the Gnome...
Sorry, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Professional.
I completely wait till you hear next Monday's episode. Like, I completely actually interrupted his intro. Like, I'm doing really bad recently. I don't know. I'm gonna shut up now.